Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call a special council meeting of Thursday, September 10th, 2020 to order. First off, we do call to order? Or do we? Yeah. Roll call, though? Are we doing?
Not yet.
Okay. Any disclosures of interest? Seeing none, we'll start right off with the report.
Yeah.
Sarah Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in January this year, Council adopted a Committee of the Whole governance structure change with the objective to improve process, clarity, and efficiency through a better governance structure. So for this, a new procedural bylaw was needed, as our current bylaw has not been significantly updated since 2007. The proposed procedural bylaw is intended to be more of a starting point, as a foundation groundwork, as this is a working document. Some of the main focus included integrating Committee of the Whole, identifying necessary revisions, such as our gaps in our old procedural bylaw, changes to the legislations, changes through observing meetings, and reviewing suggestions received throughout the year. We also researched other comparative municipal best practices, and I also received input from the leadership team. So with that being said, I know there'll be a learning curve while we all try to adjust to a new governance structure. And my main goal here tonight is to have a good starting point for the changes up ahead. And this procedural bylaw is the recommended start. So again, a procedural bylaw is a working document, and I'm sure there'll be many there could be amendments along the way, so those will be tracked in the form of a more consolidated bylaw. And so today I'm here for really feedbacks or any suggested change before any final approvals. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions? Who wants to start? Councillor Vardy? You just need to go up to the mic. It is being live streamed, so.
I don't know how you want to proceed, but I have gone through the document and I've marked off several areas that I'd like to comment on, if you want me to just to go through them. And it hasn't.
Yeah, that's perfect. We can follow along.
Okay.
Go through.
So it hasn't been paginated, but I've added pages to it for those who may have put pages on. So I'll go to page 3, 2.2, where it says this bylaw shall prevail where a conflict exists with Robert's Rules of Order. I think we should be following Robert's Rules of Order, would be my preference. Page 4.
I think Sarah wants to comment on
So the procedural bylaw is mandated under the Municipal Act, so anything that it's a legislative requirement. So a Robert's Rules isn't a legislative requirement, it's just an aid. I mean, it can follow different types of rules of order, like Marino's Rules of Order. So we should be really following the legislative rules, which would be the procedural bylaw, to take precedence over any assistive aids.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, then I'm fine with that. Okay, so that question related to general application 2.2 on the 3rd page. On the next page, under council and committee meeting general, under 3.3, I've got a big concern with planning coming under the Committee of the Whole, just because having experience on the planning committee, I know how long these meetings are, and they're really important for public input. And I feel by bringing this to the Committee of the Whole, we may jeopardize that. and our entire meeting will be taken up with planning items because our planning meetings can be quite lengthy. So I'm opposed to planning and development being part of the committee of the whole.
Sarah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as per the original governance structure change, we had the first and third Mondays as committee of the whole and a second Monday targeted as a like an extra committee of the whole if required. So if any planning matters is extensive, right, longer, then we would probably have that planning and development division committee of the whole separate on the second Monday. So it can be taken out. It doesn't have to do it all on that one committee of the whole.
So we would have a separate committee of the whole meeting for planning?
For Tuesday, if it's
Okay,
for
so
that agenda item.
my concern there would be, we currently have 2 planning meetings a month.
One, right?
Well, one in the open house generally.
Well, the open house would happen with, yes, and that's what the second Monday is there for, to have it for those open houses and the planning.
So we're still losing the time of one meeting. I'm worried that we're not giving enough attention to this item, and this being the item that most of us were elected on, it does require a considerable amount of our attention, and I think it should be given that kind of respect. So moving on to the section under closed session. Well, on the following page, point number 9, any reports or items part of a closed session shall be submitted to the clerk prior to the meeting of council for circulation. So does that include resolutions if someone wants? So any resolution has to be brought forward prior to the meeting if it relates to the item? I just want to make sure that's clear, because that's not something we've been doing.
Sarah?
Yes, I am asking for that any materials, motions be submitted ahead of time. That's just not for closed, it's also for open as well. I think it's good practice to be received ahead of time so it can be circulated ahead of time so that all of council are aware of what to make their decisions.
Okay. So if we move about 5 or 6 pages forward to, I guess it is commencement of meeting and quorum. Okay, so I just had a question about that, but I think I'm actually okay with that now, because it does get explained further on. Point number, under order of business at meetings, point number 7.3, which is on, probably on, would come under the following page or that page. We had requested that there be a report about having the Aboriginal statement reflected in our opening, and I don't see that here.
So, Mr. Mayor, that was referred back to staff to bring a report to a public input consultation piece. So once that's completed, we can amend the bylaw. Like procedural bylaw are usually amended quite a few times, so that would be an amendment that be attached, included further.
Okay, I just think that's important too. Perhaps you could make note of it and, sort of. So the following page, delegations, 7.5, item number 2. It says, all delegations will be heard at committee of the whole when possible. Where a delegate has spoken at committee or council, a further delegation request by the delegate or a related party will not be permitted on the agenda unless the delegation is bringing forward new information. Only new information will be heard at committee of council. And then the following point, the inclusion of delegations on the agenda will be on a first-come, first-served basis, and regard shall be given to the length of the agenda. And then that point continues on. I am very concerned about basically capping public input and putting limitations on public input. That is, I think, particularly important. And on that note, I think this whole bylaw should be put out for public comment. But I've got a particular problem with that. I don't think we should be limiting what our citizens want to say to us or how much time they've got to say to us. Point 4 on the following page, a delegation concerning agenda items has a maximum of 5 minutes. Delegation consisting of more than 5 persons shall be limited to 2 speakers. The allotted time includes an audio or video presentation, but does not include answering questions. Sometimes there are things that are more complex. They may take more than 5 minutes. And once again, I don't believe in limiting public input. I think that's completely the wrong direction. Section 8, delegation must abide by the rules of procedure and public conduct at meetings. They will accept any decisions of the chair and not enter into cross debate with members, other delegations or staff. Any discord between members and delegations will be limited to members asking questions for clarification and obtaining additional relevant information, only without debate. I think on important issues we need to have some debate, and I would not want to fence our discourse in terms of what we can and can't do. Section number 9, item A, a policy matter on which the council has already made a decision. No delegation shall be made to committee or council on matters relating to a policy matter upon which council has already made a decision within the last 12 months. I think at any point, if the public wants to express a concern, once again, I don't think we should be limiting public input in any way. Maybe we've made the wrong policy decision, and to say you can't say anything about it for a year, I don't think is appropriate. On the following page, delegations related to previous decision of council shall not be considered by committee or council within the delegations related to a previous decision of council shall not be considered by committee or council within the term of council unless there is a motion to reconsider. Once again, we're limiting public input, we're limiting our discourse, things change, and to say, well, we already decided that, what if we made a bad decision? Then we need to revisit. So I'm not in agreement with that point. Okay, order of speaking. Point, speaking limitations, 8.4. No member shall enter into debate with a delegation or staff. Well, once again, I don't like having those kinds of limitations put on councillors or the public. Sometimes debate is healthy as long as it's respectful. I think it's fine to have debate. So, okay, so under 9.8, motion for reconsideration. And point 2, a motion for reconsideration brought forward at a subsequent meeting. Part 2B, a notice of motion to consider a matter shall not be introduced for a period of 6 months after the original motion has passed, except with the majority consent of all members. Well, once again, I don't think we should be putting these kinds of limits on ourselves. In the event that new information comes to light, or, we've changed our minds, or what have you. Point C, a notice of motion to reconsider a matter shall only be filed and seconded by a member who voted on the prevailing majority side of the original motion. Once again, I think that's stifling our powers as councillors, and I don't agree with that. Section D, shall require the consenting vote of 2/3 majority of the members present at the meeting to reconsider a motion after the notice of motion to reconsider a matter has been filed. So same along those lines. Following page E and F, only the member moving the motion through a notice of motion to reconsider a matter may state reasons for reconsideration. I mean, I've got a problem with this section. When the motion to reconsider is resolved in the negative, no further notice of motion to reconsider a matter shall be considered again within current terms of council. I think these are all unnecessarily restrictive. And I believe that is it for my comments. Thank you very much. It's important that we that this is coming forward and getting taken care of.
Thank you, Councillor Vardy. Councillor Bothwell?
Thank you, Mayor Jordan, and through you. Appreciate the amount of work the clerk's put into this draft, and it has been quite some time since it's come through council for a fulsome review. And I'm glad to see that we're starting the process. I do hope that we take away what we're hearing today. And as you mentioned, we come back with this with some refinements, because I think we can't capture everything in one meeting, and it is going to take some due diligence. I echo a lot of the comments, and it was funny as Councillor Vardy was going through her points, she pretty well covered a lot or almost all of mine as well. And you're right on. so it covered a lot of the same concerns that I have, so you can just ditto ×2 on some of them. I'm just going to quickly go over some of the ones, and I'll just skim over some of the ones that you've covered as well. Definitions Advisory Committee. Means a committee created by council to report to the committee of the whole on a specific subject. I don't think that that's the key definition of an advisory committee. It's not on a specific subject. Often they're created for to meet a strategic priority outcome, or to deliver on a number of different subject areas or mandates. So I think we need to look at a different word for that, the purpose of those committees. Especially like Heritage Advisory Committee has a specific role under legislation and an act, while some of the other committees are more general. Throughout the document, and you might be aware of this, you've used sort of similarly, for the same context, the word motion and the word resolution, but yet they do mean two different things, and I think we need to refine how you're looking at those definitions. Motion means a proposal moved by a member and seconded by another member for the consideration of council or a committee. I'm fine with that. But then resolution means, and you said proposal, I would suggest you say means a motion moved by a member and seconded by another member for the consideration of council or a committee. And instead of and, I'd say where a decision has been, instead of carried, because carried means passed positively. Instead of the word carried, you might want to look at using the word where a decision has been rendered, recorded, something like that. So I think just clarifying the terminology on those two is important as you use them throughout the document. 2.3, matters not governed by this bylaw or dealt with in Robert's Rules of Order shall be decided by majority vote of the members present. I believe that rule should be the chair's rule. But again, I can understand that some complex decisions, if it's the responsibility of all of council to take that on, it might be where you're coming from, but I think we just need to consider how that whether that follows standard protocol. I think we are going to find, as Councillor Vardy said, the planning and development meetings are going to take up the majority of our committee of the whole. So I think we have to be open to looking at this process as we move forward and say, it's working, or no, it's not working. And we need to be able to, same with the COVID thing, might have to backtrack and look at doing things differently if it isn't working. 3.3, number 3, B and C. We briefly just talked about this as we went through this COVID period with during the months of June, July, August, and September, Committee of the Whole shall meet at 6 p.m. And then C is a reduced summer meeting schedule of one regular Committee of the Whole meeting can be considered by resolution of council. And I think what happened we found is that it didn't work for September because we're going to be like really overburdened this month with catch up from July and August. So June, July, and August. So I'd like to see, if possible, we remove September and September be retained as a regular month for regular meetings. This gets to Councillor Vardy's question about the second Monday of each month. So number 4 shall be tentatively scheduled as a provisional Committee of the Whole meeting or a workshop meeting as necessary and as determined by the clerk. So I think what we're going to find is that's going to be more and more needed to cover the amount of planning issues that are coming up. So something to think about. 3.6 advisory committees. Just want to understand the way that minutes will be received from those advisory committees. And again, because I'm thinking as well, if that includes boards, local boards, not just advisory committees, and committee of adjustment. So I think we need a little clarification on the application of that. Advisory committee recommendation will be received for information by Committee of the Whole. Recommendations from the advisory committees requiring council endorsement shall be placed on the council endorsement package at the Committee of the Whole for approval. So I just want to see that we're capturing the correct routing of library board minutes, which are already, council doesn't approve them because they're already approved by the board, museum board, and the Heritage Advisory Committee, those kinds of things. And then Committee of Adjustment isn't mentioned anywhere in here. I know it is a separate entity, and maybe it doesn't need to be, but I just think we need to look at how we're capturing those recommendations and minutes that come out of those advisory committees, because it was a bit of a concern through the regular process. Closed session, 3.72. For any meeting at which there are items to be considered in a closed session, the agenda for that meeting shall identify the subsections of the Municipal Act which authorizes each item to be considered at the closed session. And then 3C says the general nature of the matter to be considered at the closed meeting. I think, and I didn't have time to go and pull it out, but I think Bill 68 identified that you can't just do the general nature. It has to be specific enough to give a person enough information about what the actual item is, and it has to give not just a human resources issue, it has to be more specific. And I think one of the recent bills requires that closed session, the nature of the matter has to be identified in more detail. So if you could just double check that language. I agree with Councillor Vardy about ensuring that any items or reports that are part of closed session are all included in advance of any meeting so that we're all fully aware and apprised and there's no surprises at those meetings. Almost done. It's a big document, okay? 38 pages or something. So for one night of reading, it took a bit of... It takes a bit of time to go through, so apologize for that. The attendance requirement, 3.10, number 2. So there's a number 1 and a number 2. Number 1 is, should any member of a committee, basically who's not a member of council, fail to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings. that they'll be deemed to have resigned if they don't, without authorization from the committee. But part 2, members of council shall inform the clerk of all planned absences, late arrivals, and early departures from a meeting in order for the recording of the minutes of such meeting may accurately reflect attendance. In the case of absence by reason of other municipal business or personal, the members may advise the clerk of the general nature of the matter to be recorded in the meeting minutes. I just wanted clarification if section 2 applies to members of council in attendance on advisory committees or any other committees, because often the terms of reference for those advisory committees have their own language on attendance and how those have to be handled. The library board, in fact, has its own, under the Library Board Act, on with respect to attendance and how it has to be handled. So I just want to clarify if that applies to all committees and advisory meetings as well.
Sarah?
So for the most part for this, it would apply to committee of the whole and council. Advisory, I think there's another section that I'm trying to look for that says that the clerk may do a more simplified version of this procedural bylaw for advisory meetings, because there's that informality in advisory meetings that it's more necessary. So this is more for committee of the whole and council for the attendance.
I think that we have to be cautious if we're looking at implementing a procedural bylaw or something specific to other advisory committees. I think this, right now, the terms of reference all say this is the governing document for all committees. So I think it's important that we don't have multiple versions going around between different advisory committees. That they have a different procedural bylaw version than this one. It's going to cause confusion. I think the terms of reference for the committee, if you want to refine that, maybe, but I think they have to be sort of consistent, but yet you have to watch ones that have legislation that overrule our own procedural bylaw, right? So that's all. I'm just saying, just to have a look at it a little further, and I'm sure you'll come back with some at the next meeting with some clarification on that. I'll leave it with you. Again, because at the beginning of this document it says it applies to all committees, and it refers to that at the beginning. Section 6, commencement of meeting and quorum, I just want to ensure that that, again, applies to all committees, advisory as well as committee of the whole and council. I appreciate the number 7, order of business at meetings and the format of the agenda, that we've now got the approval of the agenda in there and a few other items that weren't previously in there. I do note that part of the approval of agenda talks about section 7.3, number 1, the agendas for a meeting shall be adopted by a resolution at the start of the meeting, including any new business. And then number 3 says, any addition of new business may be put forward with respect to items, but to be adopted by council without issuance of a notice of motion. The question shall be supported by a minimum 2/3 of the members present. So there isn't a section in your list for new business. So I don't know if you need to have that added to the agenda list, so that if an item is under approval of the agenda added as new business, you'd need a section that says new business where those items would be captured in the minutes then, right?
So I was looking for a new business to be included under the approval of the agenda session, but again, addition of a new business and to discuss it at that meeting would require 2/3. So for the approval for any, you can always delete or defer normally under the approval agenda, but if you add any new business during this section of the approval of the agenda, then that particular addition would be a 2/3 because it is new business, yeah.
But where does it get added? Like, it's not showing in your order, so I think that it needs to be under like
the minutes would kind of reflect it under the approval of the agenda, like a new business section, if it's added.
Is that how you're going to do it? Instead
Yeah,
of having
that's how I was
a totally
thinking.
new business section? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, from other procedural bylaws, from other minutes and stuff, they have an actual new business section.
Yes.
That's not tied into the approval agenda.
I can have a subsection.
Just something to think about. And it just makes it a lot clearer to find if there is a 2/3 and somebody has added an item. And again, just clarification on, and I don't think committee of adjustment was added to the PBL before they have their own PBL, but 7.4, number 2, the minutes of each meeting of advisory committees or other committees shall be presented to the next committee of the whole to be received for information. So I just want to ensure we're talking about all of them, but that's just for clarification. Delegations, this is 7.5, echo Councillor Vardy's concerns on all those points. I also noted that specifically number 9A, a policy matter upon which council has already made a decision, that no delegation shall be made to committee regarding those matters. I think we do have to be we're open, that's our whole, wasn't it open and transparency? That's what we are. We wanted public engagement. That's our whole strategic priorities and stuff, is to try to bring that, bring the public into the chambers and have them speak and have them share with us their concerns. And we can't limit debate. We can't limit the public's involvement. We actually have to open it up as much as we can and make it friendly and welcoming, and that we have an ear to listen to our community. That's what we're here for, and anything we put in this procedural bylaw should be reflective of that. I went to the Burlingtons, and I didn't bring it with me, but they are extremely effective in communicating with their constituents and the community through social media and other ways. And in fact, in their procedural bylaw, they have wording about open houses and delegations, and especially with respect to open houses, and I think we get a little later in the PBL on that, that we can't restrict people from participating in a statutory public meeting or just an open house by making them register. And in fact, although we're asking people to register for the upcoming open house on September 24th for the 4 Windward Drive, the opportunity for the public to provide comments verbally or in other ways needs to also be, I think, looked at, because the Planning Act talks about section, I'm reading under open houses, and I don't have it, just know it's section 16 of, I can't remember if it's 36, whatever, 19, but if the plan is being revised under section 26 or amended in relation to development permit system, the council shall ensure that at least one open house is held for the purpose of giving the public an opportunity to review and ask questions about the information and material made available under clause 15C. And it goes on about participation in public meetings. We need to make every effort we can to have various methods for our community to be able to engage us at those. And I think just registering to participate by Zoom is not the answer. So I think we should even look at that for the 24th to see if there's other opportunities for people to ask questions, and that's what the Planning Act actually says. Not necessarily as a delegation that has registered in advance. As of that day, they could come up with questions as they're listening to the presentation, and they need to have that opportunity. I participated in a number of open houses, and the region has had the Woodlands bylaw review and a few other ones like that, and they very effectively allowed the public to participate spontaneously in those and provide questions through using the chat feature or on the teleconference through the telephone. There's ways to integrate various modes of participation, and I think we have to delve much further into how to provide all the depth and breadth of participation, and as well with particular emphasis on accommodating anyone who has any special needs to do that. So with respect to delegations, and then that moves into the open houses that we're doing as part of planning. But those are all just key considerations I'd like to bring forward. Consent motion agenda 7.6, number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is any member before the consent motion is voted on may remove any number of items of business from the consent motion, and such items shall be dealt with separately and in the order in which the item appears on the agenda. And then the next one is 3. Any member before the consent agenda is voted on may add to the consent agenda any numbers of items of business from the agenda. Just wondering if we're going to have some back and forth there where someone wanting to remove it and someone saying add it back in. I don't know if it's going to cause grief with respect to one council member might say I want to remove that and lift it, and another one says no, I'll just leave it in there, or I want to add, and they add something back in that's similar. I just don't know if that wording works. If it does, then that's fine, just so there's no conflict between those two actions. Correspondence 7.8, number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is correspondence received from municipalities and local boards within the Niagara region, and requesting endorsement or consideration of a resolution shall be listed on the agenda. 2 is correspondence received from municipalities and local boards outside of the Niagara region, and requesting endorsement shall be circulated to council and placed on the agenda only if the request of a member of council. I don't see any, and this came up a couple of times I've mentioned, where correspondence from the region is received or from other levels of government is received by staff at town hall, and that correspondence can be time sensitive or requests a response from the town. I think that we need to make sure we're very inclusive and very aware of any correspondence that's received that requires an immediate action or is time sensitive for council to respond to. And some things that town staff may feel is within their purview may still be of importance to council, in the sense that we're asked for input or direction on something as council is the policy setting body. It might be something that we would like to contribute to. So it's important we see those documents, and that we also include in their correspondence something that says general correspondence from the public. We often receive emails or general correspondence from the public that they want it recorded, and it goes to all of council. So how are we handling stuff that comes to us through our email, and with respect to maybe a development issue in town, or a site bylaw alteration or something, and they want all of council to be aware and they have a concern. I think there's some way we need to capture that. I know there's confidentiality and stuff too, but with respect to if they have an issue that they want us to address or look at, I think we need to include it somehow in the correspondence in those records. Almost done. So the bit I talked about motions and resolutions and the difference between them shows up in number 9, motions. You referred to number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All refer to a motion or resolution shall be in writing. A motion or resolution has not been seconded. So I think we just need to clarify what you mean there, because it's one or the other, not both, I think. Motion for reconsideration 9.8. Number C, shall require the consenting vote of a majority of the members present at the meeting. And I will strongly object to that. I think it needs to be, sorry, it's the second one, 2/3. It's for at the same meeting, it's majority. At the subsequent meeting, it's 2/3. And again, Councillor Vardy's point about time limits, we can make a decision that is maybe needs to be re-reviewed again, and legislation changes or something comes up where we need to review something, or the public makes us aware of something that we're not dealing with in the manner in which we should be. And I think we need to have that option to not have a time limit on that that's so restrictive. Sorry, I was good with the 2/3 on that, Sarah. I'm the clerk, okay, so I'm good with the majority for reconsideration at the meeting. and reconsideration following subsequent meeting 2/3. I'm good with that. My question about 2/3 is coming up a little later on another one. That's the motion to call a question. That's the one that I have the concern with under 9.9. Just want to confirm if that one, it says, is that one 2/3, the motion to call the question?
Sorry, majority. Anything that doesn't specify 2/3 would be majority. All the motions.
Okay. That one, and again, I'm going to Robert's rules and a number of other examples, it's very clear that it should be 2/3 so as not to stifle debate and not to kill a motion that's on the table. And it just, I think if you look at that a little closer, the call the question is a very democratic right to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard, and calling a question can end that. And I think that's why it should have the 2/3, which Robert's rules and even the most recent edition states that that's preferable. And that's 9.9. That's 9.9. So it isn't specified that's, and as the clerk mentioned, because it isn't specified 2/3, it's deemed to be a majority. But I would ask that you go back on that and review that closely, because I think that's a critical one that we cannot let stand as a majority, because it can take one person to change the whole decision. I was at 13, electronic participation. Electronic meetings during a non-emergency period. Now this has come up at a number of other municipalities. I know we are able to do this now because the legislation has changed to allow electronic participation during non-emergency periods. This number 13.13 also says electronic means shall include teleconferencing and Zoom. Technology changes constantly, so we may not be using Zoom, we may be using something else. So I think you might want to just look at another word for Zoom, like, to identify other modes of technology. And this gives members all the rights to vote as if they were there and everything. I think that it's Niagara Lake or another municipality is really looking closely at it, because there is a potential that you could have 3/4 of us not here in the chambers, okay? Just because this is now available. Like, I'm saying after COVID, right? So for regular council meetings, it's, people say, oh, I just want to continue to participate electronically. Is that the
Just
intent?
to comment, this part was taken from the bylaw that was passed by council. I think it was bylaw 2059. It's the same wording as that, and I think in that bylaw it's stated that we would be bringing back a review within the year, since the declaration of emergency has ended. So that is the wording taken straight from 2059, because I didn't want that additional amendments. I wanted to repeal all the amendments, so I did include it in here to consolidate it. But as part of the bylaw 2059, we will be bringing back a review within the year.
And I see that you have that under number 9. So I just, I think that's important, but electronic participation shall be permitted for a 1-year period from the termination of the provincial declaration of emergency in consideration of the public health advice to limit the spread of COVID. So I think that's important that we do look at it again, just to see whether we need to refine the requirements for electronic participation, if it just needs to be exceptional circumstances or to accommodate medical concerns or something like that. It's just, there's that potential that you could have the majority of council just not be here. So, I mean, is that effective public engagement? I don't know, you know, so just that's great that we're going to be looking at that again within the year. Almost done. 15, planning statutory public meeting. This is where I go into what I quoted about the Planning Act and the City of Burlington's openness in ensuring that we have the ability for the public to participate in a number of different ways. And I think the heading of that planning statutory public meeting might need to be changed, because planning also has open houses, which are not statutory. So if this applies to all planning public meetings, it would not just be statutory. And again, delegations and speaking under 15.2. Number 2, delegations shall speak only once during a planning statutory public meeting. I think you just got to watch again, the language should be any planning meeting, because there's the open houses as well. And that they shouldn't be restricted to only speak once. Delegation shall register with the clerk, and that's where I'm saying we don't always have the delegations register. They should have the opportunity to come or show up or participate on the day of, and ask their questions when the information might have changed, or they hear something in the presentation that raises a question. And they may not have registered prior. So I know that with technology, we do need to look at how we can do that so people can be enabled to participate without having to register. I think that's important. So I really, really strongly think that has to be removed, that they should only speak once. I think that everyone should have an opportunity, and then the chair or whoever should determine whether a delegation can speak a second time. There may be further new information. And again, the chair is always in control, and if it's the same information that's being repeated, they can say that only bring forward any new questions or new information. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bothwell. Councillor Bain?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I guess the first thing I want to say is I think what we should probably do, this is just a suggestion for all of council to consider, is maybe schedule another meeting, and prior to that meeting have members of council email the clerk with the specific numbers and sub-numbers, and so that we can have a meeting and just discuss the ones that are of concern to certain members. Committee of the whole has already been passed. So, I mean, I would rather have some set of rules when we go into it than not have any rules. We could just live on the existing rules that we have now, so I don't think it'll be that big a deal. But the clerk did a fantastic job, and I commend the clerk highly for this excellent work. But if these members do truly have concerns, then by all means we should discuss them. But I think, as I say, I would like to see a meeting held where everybody emails ahead of time and says, these are the areas I have concerns, and then we discuss just those areas, so that way we don't have to go through the whole document again. I just want to point out a couple of things. The advisory committees, I've always been a strong proponent of having their minutes and recommendations put forward as information. I think that's something that council should be doing, not having committees, because people have often said to me that these committees are not elected people and they're not accountable, so it should be coming to council for that. I did want to address one comment by Councillor Bothwell about the majority of council not being in attendance. For several months there, the majority of us were not in attendance at the town hall because of the COVID, and with the second wave starting up, I think it's going to happen again. So I don't see a concern with that. I mean, there's only the mayor and the clerk and the town manager in there. I don't have a problem with that. And in 9.9, where there's a calling a question and treating it as a motion, I think that's a bit overkill. I think people should have the right to call a question and not have to vote on whether we're going to call a question. We're getting to the point where we're going to start, doing motions for everything. If we want to get up and go get a drink of water, do we need to put in a motion? I mean, it's just a bit much. That's the one I have a concern with. Everything else I'm pretty good with. Like I said, I've listened to the comments of the other councillors, and I would like to sit down and discuss these as a group. But as I say, I would hope that we can all just email the clerk ahead of time, and the clerk can say, this is what we're going to discuss. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. And just commend the clerk. I know she put a lot of time into this. I spent a lot of time talking to her about the different things that I like and don't like in our current procedural bylaw. And so I think you've done a great job, Sarah. Some of the things my colleagues have already talked about and I want to talk about is the time limits. 10 minutes. I was timing us as we were speaking now, and often, like it was 10, Councillor Rothwell spoke for 29 minutes, but That's a little long, but this is a more exceptional because we're talking about a 38-page document. But often you get up, 5 minutes is not a long time. It goes by pretty fast. It seems like a long time when you're standing here. Like every second is 2 heartbeats or something, right? And it feels like a long time, but 5 minutes goes by quick. And both for a delegation, so, because I've delegated or spoken at public meetings to the council even before I was a member of council. And 10 minutes comes up pretty quick. So first I want to talk about, or the 5 minutes come up quick. I think it should be 10 minutes. And then what I'd like, maybe if the clerk can add some language to this, would be section 8.3. And so like 8.3.2 says a member initially speaks for 5 minutes. And I'd like that to be 10 minutes, if my colleagues are agreeable. And I would like to say that on notice of the time limit, in a separate point, on notice of a time limit, that they may request an extension of 5 minutes. And that would be put to a vote with no debate. So if I'm speaking and my 10-minute comes up, the mayor notifies me and says, your time is up, Councillor Sharp. And then I could request and say, I request an extension, right? And then no debate, it just goes, and the mayor calls all in favor, and it's like, it can happen very quickly, because sometimes, you might have a minute left, or 30 seconds left, or maybe 4 minutes left. And I think that would be an easy way to allow us, without really belaboring and making a big point of like, I need more time and calling everybody's vote. It could happen quite smoothly. So if we could add something like that. And the same thing for the 3 minutes, on notice, you could ask for an extension. The other thing, in the same section, 8.3, 8.5, sorry, number 2, any member is talking about when the chair has asked a member to vacate the chamber. It says that any member other than the member ordered to vacate the council chambers may appeal the chair's ruling through a majority vote. I think that the member asked to vacate should also be able to appeal. And so if the chair were to say, because it happens fairly quickly, there's like a warning and then there's like, you gotta leave. And it's like, you should be able to say, listen, I appeal. So I'd like to see that to say any member, not other than the member, may appeal the chair's ruling through a majority vote. Like, because the majority makes the decision, so the person should still be able to appeal. And then it's up to the majority. Some of the others, sorry, there's a lot of stuff here. Oh, now we're into the motion to defer. So it says that it shall be put to a vote immediately with no debate, and that a member presenting the motion to defer shall not speak to the motion first. And I understand where we're going with that, and so this was actually one of the things I talked to the clerk about. But there are some cases where, especially on controversial issues, we may all speak to something. We may all speak to something twice. There's something that might come up. We might say, I speak to it, and each of my colleagues speaks to it, and a few of us get up and speak to it a second time. And then it comes to the point where we're frustrated, to the point of where we just want to defer it, right? And so everyone may have spoken to it, and we may just get to the point where it's like, we can't make our decision, and we may, so there could be a time, so this is my question to the clerk, how in that circumstance could we defer it? Like, could we change it to say maybe no member, I don't know. Can you give me some advice or input?
Sorry, can you clarify the question for me one more time?
Okay, so a motion to defer is a member presenting the motion to defer shall not speak to the main motion first. So what about where after everyone's spoken, to the motion? Or could we change it to say that a member presenting the motion to defer shall not speak to the motion first?
So just to clarify, I meant for that, say they're debating, the member of council speaks, and then you can't bring that motion to defer right after your discussion piece. So you shouldn't be
Yeah.
speaking and then putting that motion right away. You should be putting this motion first, the motion to defer, before doing your speech.
Okay, so then to clarify, say for example, this motion, whatever motion we're in right now, we all get up and we talk about it, and then we decide we want to defer it. Can a person, so say each of us gets up and speaks, and we talk about this point, that point, this point, whatever, and then at the end, one of us gets up for a second time and says, you know what, can we just defer this until the next meeting? Are we prohibited, based on the language in this, from moving to defer since we have spoken to it already?
Sorry, if you're already done your speaking and then another member spoke, then you can bring this motion then. But you can't do your speaking first and then bring it right away. It's just to be fair, so that you should be technically bringing it first, this motion to defer before your debate.
So can we change it to say like a member presenting a motion to defer shall present the motion immediately when given the floor, rather than not, because the language here confused me to where I thought that if I spoke to it, that I couldn't get back up and speak to defer it. And so if the intent of this is that a person shall not get up and speak and then move to defer while he has the floor, that a person shall, if moving to defer, shall do it immediately when given the floor, not after speaking. Because I understand the intent, and I like that intent, but just the way that this is the verbiage. Immediately once being given the floor. Yeah, without speaking to the motion first, right? Because the way I read it, but I understand the intent, but that's... It's a member presenting a motion to defer. Okay, sorry, if I can just, if it were to read, a member presenting a motion to defer shall present the motion immediately when given the floor.
Would it be okay if it stated, a member presenting a motion to defer shall not speak to the main motion immediately prior?
Shall not speak to the main motion, period. They shall present the motion immediately after given the floor.
I'll work on that.
It's a little wordy, but like, you know the intent, so like, as long as it gets set across. Because this, when I read this, I think that it's like, after I speak, I can't motion to defer. And when a motion is frustrated, so I'm like, okay, I'll table it or something different, which is very similar to deferral, but the intent is not to prevent us from deferring, it's to prevent us from speaking to it and then moving to defer. No, but I think you understand what I'm saying. So then for the motion for reconsideration, 9.8, it says that it shall only be moved and seconded by a member who has voted on the prevailing majority. So does that mean the mover and seconder have to have voted? And then, so it says a member, so it should say members. It should only be moved and seconded by members. And I disagree with that. I think that I agree that the mover should have voted in the majority, but the seconder, so a person who wants to reconsider their decision, having voted with the majority, should be able to move to reconsider it. And then I think anyone should be able to second it. We have other things that make it fairly restrictive with the 2/3 majority. It makes it difficult to reconsider something. But just to put it on the floor, I think that Then on 9.82B, it says a notice of motion to reconsider a matter shall not be introduced for a period of 6 months after the original motion is passed, except with the majority consent of all members. Is that unanimous consent? So majority consent of all members present, or majority? It's just the way it's majority consent of all members, like, is that? Okay. And the same thing where it says that it shall be moved and seconded by a member who voted in the prevailing. I think that just be moved by a member, seconded by any member. It just happens twice there, right back to back. And getting to recorded vote 11.6. And I know of late we have, where the chair has been reading or calling members to vote. And in the past, the clerk called members to vote. And I feel like that's more appropriate because the chair also votes. And I think I would prefer to see the clerk to call the names and each person to vote. I think that's it. So I just want to say again, thanks for all your hard work to this. And I know it's a lot to go through, and I think you've done a good job.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Frey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sarah, I must admit, you've done a great job with this. I mean, you've taken a document that was all over the place and pulled it all together and put in a lot of things that were missing for sure. This is going to be a really, really important document for us because it's the one that we need to use to guide us through every council meeting, and it's really our operation. It's like our operations manual. And I'm not going to go through, I mean, all of my previous colleagues have mentioned a lot of the things I wanted to mention. I'll just go through a few. Bear with me for a second here. More questions than anything else. Under the duration of meetings. So with this document, I assume we're going to be starting at 6:30 with Committee of the Whole, and 7 o'clock we begin our regular council meeting. Is that the way it works? This is under 3.8. Currently, we've had 4 hours.
Committee of the Whole would start at 6:30, and then council will follow after Committee of the Whole. So,
Whatever time that
yeah.
might be. Okay, so then we have the 11 p.m. deadline. That could be 4.5 hours for a meeting before we call a vote to continue. I just think we should need to have a duration of a meeting. I mean, like we've had marathon meetings here up to 8 hours, and I think we need to draw some line somewhere in the sand where because I mean, it's a long day, a long night, a lot of material, and I think we just become too exhausted to think about what we're doing and to make right decisions. So I think we need to have a time limit for the duration of a meeting.
So in section 5, in the 3.85, it states that a vote will require if any meeting extends past 5 hours. So that could be if we started early, like a special council meeting at 5, then at 10 you would have that vote. So no meeting to go 5 hours. So that would be the limit.
But then, so every hour thereafter?
Yes, and
We
I
vote.
think I have that in
Is
the
that correct?
next part.
So every hour thereafter, we vote to continue. Is that the way I read it?
Yes, on section 2,
In section,
3.82. Shall be required at every hour beyond 11 p.m.
Okay, that covers that. Um, Under the same section 5, it says a consenting vote of a majority of the members present at the meeting shall occur when the meeting duration extends past 5 hours. I think there's a little bit of a conflict there, but not a big deal. I've got a lot of notes here, but I'm not going to repeat what most of my colleagues have already said, so bear with me for a second. I do want to say that under the order of business at meetings, I do concur with some of my colleagues under having new business spelt out on the agenda. I think that should be there. I think that's pretty much standard for most agendas in most municipalities. Under notices of motion, a notice of motion must be made in writing and delivered to the clerk no later than 4:30 on a Wednesday. What do we have now? Is it Friday? Are we moving it back 2 days?
Currently, it's Friday. We're asking for Wednesday because we want to publish it, agendas earlier once we go committee of the whole.
You're going to have to be very vigilant on that one. Yeah, I guess under 8.5, disregard of the chair. And it goes back to what Councillor Sharp mentioned. Does the member, or will the member, or should the member have a right to vote to reinstate the member to come back and to stay in the chamber? I think there's some. I'm thinking not, because it's like saying if you're guilty of something then you have to vote on for yourself. It's actually probably requires a bit of debate, but yeah, it's a tricky one. So I think we need to think about that and maybe come back to you with some thoughts on it. Under 8.8, decorum at council. No participant shall interrupt or distract a person who has the floor. The chair may interrupt only to raise a point of order. It says only the chair can do that. But in the past, we've been just doing it. Is that correct?
Sorry, that should say any member may interrupt only to raise a point of order.
Okay, so
any members can raise a point of order.
okay, so that needs to be changed. Okay.
Yeah.
A motion, under 9.6, motion to adjourn. Is what you're saying here, a motion to adjourn can be called at any point in the meeting?
Yes, motion
Is
to
that-
adjourn can be called at any point of the meeting.
And only a majority vote
Yes.
can push it through?
Yes.
Is that normal? Is that Robert's Rules of Order? Or is that just ours? Our procedural?
It is a practice done in many municipalities. It is a motion that's accepted in many municipalities.
I don't think we've ever
And
done that.
we've had it too
Have
in
we
our
done it?
previous procedural bylaw. We do currently have a motion to adjourn.
So in the middle of the meeting, anybody can just adjourn without specific purpose, reason?
Yes.
Okay, it's different. Under 9.9, motion to call the question. Like, can it be called any time, or do you have to be have to be, have your hand up to speak? I mean, can you just call it, because we've been doing that in the middle of discussion and debates many times throughout in the past. Can we just call that any time?
For proper decorum, calling the question, point of order, point of a privilege, it should have always go through the chair. So you should be acknowledged by the chair first and to call it. And
Okay, so if somebody on council wants to do that,
so they would raise their hand and then the chair would,
and then would they, if they're third on the list, do they have to wait till their turn
No,
comes?
to
But
call,
how does the chair know it's a point of order?
well, you would say point of order and just quietly state.
And that's it, just
yes,
call a point of
yes.
order, put your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the mayor would acknowledge that, and then the motion, the point of order would be called.
Okay, I just think it needs to be kind of elaborated in here a bit. Under voting, 11.2, says every member present at a meeting, including the chair, shall vote. But that doesn't really happen unless we call for a recorded vote. Is that correct? Under 11.2, all members to vote. Every member present at a meeting, including the chair, shall vote on the question at hand.
Yes, all members should be voting unless you've declared a conflict of interest. So if you abstain from voting, that would be recorded in the negative.
So maybe I'm confused. I thought the chair only voted when there was a tie. Unless it's a recorded vote.
A recorded vote, yes.
This is,
I think to clarify that, it'd be, only if I was voting in the negative would I say that.
okay,
See what
I just
mean?
think it
Like,
is,
so if something's passed without a formal, called, like, if it's just a show of hands, it would assume that I'm voting in favor unless I actually say.
I just think, yeah, I understand, but I think we just need a little clarification around that.
That's the way I've always
Okay.
done it anyway, and I think it's been done previously that way.
In our current procedural bylaw, it says that the chair can vote, but he should wait till after everyone else votes. So if it's already approved and it's voted in affirmative, then it's just approved. But if
Okay. I think we just need a little clarification on it.
the chair only really needs to
Thank you. Good point. Yeah.
unless if it's a tie, you only have to state it if it's a tie or it's recorded, but you still get to vote.
Under electronic participation, I tend to agree with my colleagues. The electronic means shall include teleconferencing. Maybe we should just replace Zoom with video conferencing. Because with Zoom, you're kind of specifically calling a particular type of software. And in 13.18, it says, in the case where a member requests electronic participation in an otherwise in-person meeting, that person shall notify the clerk at least 4 business days. I think that's that's too far out. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of us could end up today, for example, not being able to attend for some reason or other, but would want to Zoom in or do a teleconference. I think 4 days out is just a bit too long. Okay, so other than going back over all the things that my colleague said, I will say it's a great document. I think we're nearly there, but I think one more kick at this. I think we should be there. I like Councillor Vane's idea of us submitting our ideas, and you compiling them, and maybe voting on them, something similar to how we voted on the budget. Item by item, just vote on them. Because otherwise we'll be kicking this document around for the next 6 months. I'd like to see it done quickly. Just my thoughts.
So if I have a consensus, I'll amend the bylaw and propose the new recommended bylaw. And if there's anything that seems conflicting, then I'll bring a list so that council can vote on those.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Want to say, job well done on this. I there's some points I agree with my colleagues on, and then there's other things that I take a look and say that there's reasons why they are like they are, to create and to maintain a democratic society. So just wanted to say again, no one person should, just like in this bylaw, we're all making decision to pass this bylaw. So just like anything else, again, this bylaw, it's not Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order, just like many other ones, are there as a tool, as a guideline, and that also gives us a lot of tools that I think that anything is possible even with this document. There's a lot of tools that we have. So with that, I wanted to just bring up a couple points. First one is 3.5, which is in special meetings. One thing that I noticed that just isn't there right now is that we don't have, right now, in order to call a special meeting under the Emergency Act, we brought it down to 6 hours. I know that the agenda has to be posted 24 hours before, so I'd like to see maybe a recommendation of 30 hours to call a special meeting, and that would give the clerk a 6-hour time frame to put together the possible agenda for a special meeting, as it's supposed to be published 24 hours beforehand. So that's the first one I wanted to look at. 3.5, 1 second. I'm sorry, just before that, 3.3. I know that planning is a huge concern for many individuals here, but if we're having meetings, the Committee of the Whole on the first and third month, so there's 2 opportunities to bring planning up at those 2 meetings, plus the second meeting or Monday of the month. So there's a potential to have 3 meetings a month, or there'll be 2 for sure that will address planning, and possibly a third one to deal with all issues. And I think it's great. And one of the things I think we need to recognize that is that this has been stated that it's a working document. So if we find in a period of time, one of my suggestions is that we also need to think of a time frame, whether it's 3, 4, 5 months, that we do some form of review process and maybe give our comments as to what's working, what's not working, and give those suggestions so we could possibly amend the document as well. So I think that it's good to see how it works at the beginning and not get tied up on things. In a month or so, if it doesn't work, then maybe, I'm sure if it's not working, there'll be more than one member of council that will speak to that effect, and we can look at a change. Okay. 8.7.9. Okay. Sorry. I didn't print this off, so I just went have it all online here. Yeah, that's fine. 8.5. So again, I wanted to comment on 8.5. The comments made about disregard of the chair. If a member is, if somebody is kicked out of a meeting and that member wanted to appeal, I don't know, maybe a thought process is to automatic recess, 5 minutes. I don't know if that's would be acceptable or not. It also has in there that the member has the opportunity to apologize where he'll be reinstated. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention there as well. And then 9.8, motion to reconsideration. I just wanted to say that When we talk about the 6 months that have passed, I think that, again, we have lots of tools available to us that it even says here, except with the majority consent of all members, that we could bring it back. I think this makes us do our due diligence and make our decisions and put a lot of thought into our decisions. I don't know if 6 months is appropriate to start. Maybe we should be looking at a 2-month time frame or something along those lines. Can extend it, but again, a working document, we need to see what works for everyone. And then continuing on, motion to call the question. Again, it states here if a member wanted to call the question, that every member of council still has the opportunity to speak if they have not spoken to it. And that being said, at first I probably was not in agreement of 9.92, that the chair shall take a vote on a motion to call the question. But I think that there's a lot of validity to that if councillors still want to debate the topic at hand, that a motion would be a clear indication. And then in my research and doing some, like in part 15, it's planning of public meetings. So this is only dealing with public meetings. So in delegations and speaking, and looking at some other bylaws in other municipalities, they've put an order of how people could speak, and I'd like to see an order possibly presented here, being first those people that are opposed, second those people that support it, and then the applicant themselves speak at the public meetings. Anything other than that, again, thanks for the work well done. Oh, I did have one question. If you had to give a percentage of, because I notice a lot of this new bylaw is reflective of our old bylaw. So if you had to give a percentage, what would you say that the percentage is of a lot from our old bylaw?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I wasn't looking at our whole bylaw when I was making,
Okay.
I wanted it like a fresh start, so I was, I didn't really look
That's
at,
fine.
I didn't compare with our old bylaw.
No problem. Okay, thank you. I just noticed that a lot of things are very similar, but that just shows that most bylaws out there are very close, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Dunstall. Councillor Cadwell, you can speak before that motion.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. The rules of procedure, there's a couple, one that I think, the 5-minute for the delegation. Been around a little while, and it's always been 10 minutes, which is a guideline, which I do agree with. I think it gives the opportunity for the presenters ample time, but if a delegation needs more time, the chair, which has happened many, many times in the past, can allow, with the approval of council, to allow the delegation or presenter to continue on, his presentation. So 5 minutes is too short, but I think if we can go, we're 10 minutes now, but if we can, what I recall, so if we can go back to 10, leave it at 10 minutes, I think that's, again, the discretion of the chair to allow any more ample time. To do with the standing committees, I've done a lot of research. I've talked to friends of mine that are councillors in other municipalities, and all 4 standing committees are part of the Committee of the Whole. That's how business is taken care of. So I definitely support that. So again, I don't know if anybody else has done any research, talked to any other councillors that are, Town of Lincoln is just starting the Committee of the Whole. Town of West Lincoln has been doing it for a little while. And everybody seems to be very, very happy with the procedures and rules to it and how it takes care of business. So, yeah. And again, I want to special thank you, Sarah, for all the hard work you put into this. Again, it's in conjunction with Robert's rules, rules of procedure, and it has a good component of a made in Grimsby, session for, I mean, not session, but the whole, the rules of procedure for Grimsby. So anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cadwell. Councillor Dunstall.
Yeah, can I call a motion to defer?
Yeah. Councillor Ritchie.
Can I just, before I make comments, right? I just had a point of motion. It hasn't been seconded yet, so I just got recognized by the chair. So just wanted to ask quickly, is it better to defer this or refer it back to staff with the option of opening it up to allow certain comments to be made? Like you said, if there was, because if we're just deferring it, then we're not allowing any opportunity to work on the document from now till the next meeting. So that's why I wanted to ask that maybe we should look at refer it with the possibility of over the weekend until say Monday or whatever the case is, to whatever date it is that we're looking at referring it to, and that allows comments to come from councillors, and if there's things that are unanimous, you add to the document. If not, we bring it back like that was suggested by other councillors. And so that's the only reason why I was asking.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I think referring it back to staff does make more sense. Councillor Vardy, you wanted to say something as well? Before we have a mover and a seconder for referral.
Thank you. Sarah, I just have one question. I know I'm not supposed to touch that. Delegations have to make their request to be a delegation by the end of day Wednesday, right? But agendas are supposed to be published 72 hours ahead of time. So even if that's 72 business hours, that's Thursday, right? Less if it's not business hours, so or business days. So my concern is if we have an item of big interest for our residents, they're not going to be able to make a delegation, and we might be passing something that people who want to be able to input on don't have the opportunity to input because the agenda comes out after the deadline for when you'd want to make a delegation. So somehow I think we need to be able to address that.
So in 7.57, if any delegation request comes after the deadline, the clerk will provide it to the chair, and a majority vote can happen to allow the delegation to speak. Those are for more emergency delegations. Because it wouldn't be fair to the people who met the deadlines.
But how can they meet a deadline to talk to an agenda item if they don't see the agenda? If the agenda is published after the deadline, you basically preclude them from being able to come forward to be able to speak to an item on the agenda.
Councillor Vardy, maybe I can clarify. At the region, because the agenda is set quite far in advance, quite often there are delegations that come after the deadline, and I would say almost every time, if not every time, they've been allowed to speak at council.
However, Mr. Mayor, I know of people who have been told that they haven't met the deadline, so they couldn't speak. So somehow I think this needs to be reflected in our bylaw, because people need to have the opportunity to address items that are on the agenda, and we haven't been publishing forward agendas. So, I mean, if we have forward agendas, then certainly we can do that by the deadline. But because we've never had a forward agenda, we need to sort of make sure that our bylaw allows that kind of representation from residents. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you can change that, I think.
We could change the deadline to Friday at noon. Yeah, if that works with
providing the agenda is published Thursday.
Councillor Dunstall, did you want to be the mover for that referral? Or, and a second?
Defer or
Refer. Councillor Frake?
So I understand correctly, you want to refer?
I just have one question before we vote on this. Can you distribute a copy of the Microsoft Word of this so that we can edit and add notes to it? And then send it back to you?
What was the question? Sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you distribute a copy of Microsoft Word?
Oh, Word document.
All right, I have the resolution. Moved by Councillor Dunstall, second by Councillor Frey. Resolved that report TC 20-04 dated September 10th, 2020 be received, and that bylaw 2065, a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council, local board, and committee meetings be referred back to staff. All in favor?
Yes.
All right, that's carried. Need a mover and seconder for leave to get in the first bylaw read. Councillor Vardy,
Just the confirming bylaw.
just the confirming bylaw. Seconder? Councillor Ritchie. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Ritchie. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 20-65 inclusive, read a first time, now be read a second and third time, and finally passed, that the mayor and town clerk do sign and seal the same, and rule of council to the contrary notwithstanding. All in favor? That's
Yes.
carried. That's carried. All right, so my order's wrong. That's why I was reading that. Mover and seconder for the first reading now that we've read it in a second and third time. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Bothwell. Moved by Councillor Sharp, second by Councillor Bothwell. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 20-66 inclusive, and that be read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. Meeting is adjourned. Good work, council.
Things left